Wow. You know, some days it seems like the world is collapsing all around you, and on other days it actually is. Well, this is one of those days. Welcome to the Pyrocene epoch, my friends. We're going to talk about what that is in just a moment, but we got to go over some of these headlines today because everything that could possibly go wrong, well, let's just put it this way. Murphy's Law is in full effect today, all right? 2 Russian nuclear-capable bombers were destroyed deep within Russia. To date, nearly a dozen attacks on Russian nuclear-related facilities. It's only a matter of time. I mean, it is absolutely inconceivable right now how this isn't Mad Max yet. It's only a matter of time before the Russians respond, not in Ukraine, but on a NATO facility. And that's when shit's about to get real. We have more drone attacks on Moscow. We have a top Russian general not threatening, but saying that they're going to invade more countries after they're done with Ukraine. We have plenty of news on the Ukraine front with respect to what is going on there right now. Of course, some of you probably know that the F-16s have already touched down in Ukraine. In fact, they're going to be getting 61 planes from just 2 countries, which means that when all is said and done, Ukraine is going to get hundreds of F-16s, and not too long after that, it's going to be the top tier, the top trim, F-35s, baby. It's not going to be that long after that, okay? And this is, we're going to talk all about the details of that in just a moment. California prepping for the first hurricane in 80 years. Panic buying has ensued. Everybody is trying to get sandbags. This is why we advise people to get your sandbags beforehand. They serve a variety of different uses in a collapse or disaster scenario, not only for, you know, flood protection, but also for the Mad Max phase of things, which we've demonstrated on the channel before, and as the military has demonstrated for hundreds of years. Slovenia, 2/3 of it is underwater. We got fires, floods, droughts everywhere. This ain't the Anthropocene. I'm starting to call it the Pyrocene. We're going to talk about that in a moment. The fires are just on a scale that is unimaginable right now up here in Canada. The state of emergency persists. And as I'm going to talk about next weekend, it is going to get much worse. They're not talking about this yet. As per usual, we're always ahead of the mainstream who gets their reserve place on the trending page. You know, we've been talking about fire activity for years on this channel. Never been on trending once. But if you're CBC News, you'll get on trending and you still won't break 200,000 views. That is the power of independent media, my friends. Anyways, next weekend, a heat dome is going to descend over the region that is currently on fire, or one of the regions, and boy is that going to cause chaos. Just remember where you heard it first. The economy is breaking in more ways than one. There's 10 ways that the economy is breaking. In the last couple days, I was interviewing Lynette Zhang over at ITM Trading. Go and watch those 2 videos. She breaks it all down. I went into those interviews trying to play the devil's advocate, trying to be a little less cynical than usual, and man, she straightened me out. I mean, it's not looking good. I'm going to show you guys some graphs about what is about to come with the economy, and man, we are just getting started in terms of the economic downturn. China is restructuring its economy for war. They are expanding their agricultural land. They are converting more arable land into agricultural land because they're worried about a U.S. embargo. They get a lot of food from the U.S. and they're trying to prepare themselves in advance, fill up their silos, buy as much possible food and generate as much possible food as they can, because these exercises they're doing in and around Taiwan right now are not for show. They are for a very good reason. I have some details of the F-16s being on the ground in Ukraine already. The Panama Canal is backed up as a result of a major drought. 200 ships are waiting to pass through it right now. The Panama Canal is integral to the U.S. economy. If ships cannot pass through it, the price of everything skyrockets. We're talking about 40% of consumer goods, things consumed in the United States, pass through this region, okay? So this is a huge warning for anybody who is planning on buying stuff. You might want to get it now while the getting is good, because this Panama Canal situation, as a result of the drought, billions of dollars of goods could be significantly delayed. And I mean, that's if we don't see more strikes and more other bottlenecks in the supply chain. Now, there's an Iranian oil tanker row situation happening right now. One of these oil tankers is currently off the Gulf of Mexico, I do believe, and it's being offloaded into Texas. Essentially, the U.S. is stealing Iranian oil. The Iranians aren't really happy about that, and they're making a show of it right now in the Persian Gulf, where the U.S. just committed to station 3,000 Marines. Shit is hitting the fan. There was an encounter between speedboats and drones in a U.S. warship just in the last 24 hours. Nicaragua has plans to build Russian military bases and deploy Russian missiles. You know, I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Finland is stockpiling nuclear supplies with a stated goal of having the largest stockpile of nuclear CBRN-related supplies by 2024. North Korea recently scrambled jets to intercept a U.S. recon plane. As you know, this is the week that they kick off some of those major military drills, and they're also going to have that civil defense drill where the entire population, or the majority of the population of South Korea, with the exception of essential services, are going to do a 20-minute exercise where they all evacuate to their nuclear bunkers. This is going to happen at the same time as a massive military exercise, all right? We also have something happening in Syria. Every single day, there's a close brush-in with Su-35 planes and F-35 planes there. Now, this is crucial because, of course, the U.S. and Russia are getting closer and closer to having some sort of direct encounter there, and that, of course, could have repercussions throughout the entire region. If the U.S. and the Russians get in a shooting match with Syria, I doubt it's going to be contained to that region. I think we could quickly see the entire region become inflamed, the Middle East, and just everywhere else all at once. So guys, let's break down some of these stories today. How much time do I have on the clock? Okay, we got about 20 minutes or so. I think that should be enough time. 2 nuclear bombers damaged deep inside Russia. As I said at the onset of this video, nearly a dozen attacks on nuclear-related facilities in the past 19-20 months, however long this conflict has been going on. We're talking about actual nuclear facilities. We're talking about facilities that store nuclear weapons, as well as elements of the Russian nuclear triad. This is deadly serious. Each one of these bombers probably comes at a very high price tag, I presume in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And it is not so much the monetary loss, but of course Russia is struggling right now to keep its commercial planes in the air and to move its population around. So because of all of the sanctions and the embargoes, they're struggling to get the pieces of equipment that they need, the parts, in order to maintain some of these airplanes. The last thing they want to do is put a plane that wasn't 100% looked over and guaranteed to work in the air, and then they have another situation on their hands where there's an accident, and of course that's just not going to look good at all, especially in the current geopolitical climate. This would be a public relations disaster, to say the least. So this is part of the reason why this is not just a monetary issue. This is quickly becoming a Russian national security issue, and when it becomes a Russian national security issue, that's when the Russians will be left with no choice but to become more aggressive in their prosecution of the conflict. Now, where this happened was the Novgorod region, which was further than Moscow from the Ukraine border, kind of in between St. Petersburg and Moscow, signaling that this drone either had a very long range or, and this is where it gets very problematic for NATO, did it come from one of the Baltic states? Are these drones being sent from the Baltic states, or are they being sent from partisans inside of Russia? The drone I'm not sure what kind of drone it was. It was a quadricopter drone, so we must presume that it came from inside Russia, because as far as I know, those things don't have a very long range. And I guess it would also signal that how they were navigating it, you know, they had to be close by. I think it was actually a grenade dropped from a quadricopter drone, okay? Now, this is just a day after numerous drone attacks inside Moscow City. In fact, they had to temporarily, and very temporarily, evacuate a part of the Moscow commercial district. And, you know, this is becoming all too common. The war is getting very, very close to Muscovites, and it's only a matter of time. There's some rumors circulating right now. Before I forget about this, this is breaking news, that this is out of Bloomberg, I do believe, that Putin is being encouraged to fire Shoigu and put in to power somebody who is going to be more aggressive in their prosecution of the conflict. And this comes on the same day that Kadyrov, the Chechen leader, who is probably 4th or 5th in command of the Russian military, maybe a little higher than that, he basically said, and he tends to be a troll, but he's also at the same time quite well-spoken in some occasions. Typically when he's in public, he speaks, he shoots from the hip, and then he says things he probably shouldn't. But when his responses are far more measured when he gives written responses, like on social media or something like that. Anyways, I think he was just trolling when he said that they're going to continue to invade any other country that offends the Quran after they're done with Ukraine. Now, the plan, it appears to be ostensibly that the Russians are going to persist all the way to Transnistria eventually. That this is the ultimate plan, is to take Odessa and to do that whole thing. That still appears to be the plan, because even this recent slip up, this Freudian slip from NATO, where they recommended or they proposed that maybe Kiev will concede some of their territory in exchange for a NATO membership, which they're already a de facto member of NATO. They have complete NATO interoperability with their military. They're using all NATO equipment, NATO intelligence, NATO funding. They're entering NATO right now will not give them anything else except the invocation of Article 4 and 5, okay, which I guess is significant, but in terms of how they're functioning right now, they're already NATO. Anyways, so it appears as though that is what is going to happen on that front. Now, right now, in terms of the southern part of Ukraine, the U.S. is apparently wanting Ukraine to be less risk averse. They are encouraging the Ukrainians to focus on a settlement called Robotyne, and then possibly go through Tokmak all the way to Melitopol and cut off the land bridge. And this, of course, is going to complicate things for the Russians. I can't see the Russians letting it get that far. They have many lines of defenses to break through. But the key thing to note here is that the U.S. is saying, "Hey, we're going to need you to die more faster, because you know, you're making us look bad," right? So that's not going to go over well with the Ukrainians, but apparently they still have some tricks up their sleeve. I guess we'll see. They've evacuated 60 more settlements in and around the Kharkov region as the Russian offensive ramps up there. So the Russians are pushing in the east of the country, and the Ukrainians are pushing south. Not making much progress, but still pushing south. California's first hurricane in 80 years. They're still dealing with some fire issues there as well. What happens with these fires, the same thing that happened in Hawaii, is you have these gale force winds that come ahead of the hurricane, and that causes the fire to spread much faster. In fact, in Canada here, it was so windy in parts of British Columbia and Northwest Territories that 20 kilometers, the fire traveled 20 kilometers in a day. I mean, you can try to jog 20 kilometers in a day. It's going to be difficult. You can do it. I mean, you could probably walk it, to be honest, but still, for a fire to move that fast, probably not the best comparison there, but for a fire to move that fast is just, it's inconceivable that we it's unprecedented. I had to use the word just once in the video, but the fire activity is off the charts. So make sure, guys, you stock up on sandbags in advance of these situations, because what happens, we know sandbag companies, we work with them at Canadian Preparedness, is their business model is difficult because they can only stockpile so many sandbags, and typically, there's not a big demand for sandbags until they're needed, and then the demand is overwhelming, which is why, as preppers, it should be one of those staple preps. Have a few hundred sandbags at your disposal. At Canadian Preparedness, we have not only the light duty ones, which are a bit cheaper, but we also have the heavy duty ones, and of course they are great for fortifying your home if it ever goes Mad Max style. Okay, now we have numerous countries around the world dealing with flood activity. Slovenia, 2/3 of the country is underwater. I don't know a lot of details about it, but just one more thing that is adding economic pressure on an already strained global food supply. And in terms of the fires that are ongoing, there's a state of emergency in place in British Columbia, as well as the Northwest Territories, as well as places in Washington. I do believe a state of emergency has just been enacted there. And new evacuation orders were issued overnight. Now, the firefighters, there's around 500 in and around that one region in BC, the Kelowna region, trying to get a handle on that situation there. It appears that they're starting to, they have a bit of a calm right now. The fire is still raging, but they can start to navigate it a bit more strategically. The problem is that it's going to heat up. Not right away. It's actually going to cool down for the next few days, and this is when they're going to try to get a handle on it. But particularly in the Northwest Territories, that place is going to get lit up like a Christmas tree by next weekend, because there's a heat dome descending in and around that region in the northern parts of Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, and the Northwest Territories about 7 to 10 days from now, and it's going to get very, very ugly. Okay, Prime Minister Trudeau went there for a photo op. He had to leave his vacation for that, because he's doing anything he can right now to win back public approval, which is at record lows, I presume. Hottest temperature ever recorded in August was recorded just in the last few days in Lytton, BC, the place that burned down last year, 42 degrees. Travel bans are currently ongoing. One thing I didn't really like about these travel bans is it reminded me, I got the same sense as I did, for the last 3 years. There's this patronizing tone to the fire chief there, who, I understand that they have a hard job, and it was just the language that they use. They're giving people the whole, you need to evacuate because you're putting us in harm's way. We've all heard that for the last 3 years, and in some cases it's made sense for them to take that approach, but in other cases it's like, you're just saying this because you want to give yourself more authority. Well, I listened to an interview with one of the chiefs fighting the fire in and around this region, and he basically said, you need to listen to us, and we will tell you where to go and where you can go and where you can't go. So I'm starting to get that same vibe, and unfortunately this is going to fan the flames of all the conspiracy people, all the crazy shit that's being posted on Twitter, space lasers, this and that. We interviewed Green Greggs. He's a rocket scientist. He will break down why this is not only an impossibility, but it's entirely unfeasible for that sort of thing to be caused by that. People are posting pictures of propane tanks blowing up, saying that it's the government detonating bombs. It's gone batshit crazy, okay? The fact is, this is one of the most drought-stricken regions. Most of BC is in a level 5 state of drought. It's hot. Fires are going to happen in those conditions. It just so happens that they're breaking all kinds of records this year, okay? We have the Pyrocene, new word that I learned, the Pyrocene epoch. They talk about the Anthropocene as basically the sixth mass extinction event, the Anthropocene, that which is caused by humans, of course, as the result of numerous human activity encroaching on the natural world. Yes, a very large part of the species extinction we are definitely guilty of, and now the Pyrocene is what this era is being called as a result of the off-the-charts wildfire activity. So I just thought that that was an interesting terminology. If you live, and I'll say this again, I've said it for the last 3 years, we get no recognition for our except from you guys, of course, but from the greater world at large, for our warnings to people about these fires. If you do live in a wildland urban interface, you need to take emergency preparedness seriously. You need to be ready to throw all of your stuff, your valuables, your what would you call them, your keepsakes and things of that nature, into your car at a moment's notice and get the hell out of Dodge. And you have to have a plan to do that if you live in a wildland urban interface. Next year, it is likely going to be astronomically hotter. We're talking about temperatures which are even hotter than this year. July, of course, was the hottest month in recorded history, and it's going to get worse next year because that's when El Nino is going to be peaking on top of the baseline increase in global temperature that we're already seeing as a result of other stuff. Now, the economy is in the process of breaking. If interest rates continue to rise, more banks are going to collapse. This is why you have people like the Big Short shorting the market. This is why BlackRock is selling stock. This is why Warren Buffett is getting more into cash right now on the sidelines, waiting for the whole thing to collapse once again. The US is spending $1 trillion a year just on interest alone, servicing the debt. Now, the problem is, if the Fed comes out and they say we're going to lower rates, people are going to go on a buying spree once again, and that is going to fuel hyperinflation. The only thing that is keeping inflation down is the depletion of the strategic oil reserve. And even that, they're trying to put oil back into the reserve right now at these levels. So we're already going to see an uptick in inflation as a result of that, which is going to force them to deplete it even more. But what's going to happen is as soon as the Fed lowers rates, that's when everybody's going to go gangbusters in the stock market again. People are going to start taking out loans. They're going to start buying houses. They're going to start putting more stuff on credit. And the Fed knows this, so they have no choice but to delay or keep interest rates flatlined in the very least. And even if they just flatline it, you know, this is the kind of a frenzied market where people will probably take that as a green signal and start loading up once again. And the problem with their whole recession induced by unemployment approach and managing inflation by unemployment, Peter Schiff said it best. You cannot control inflation by reducing people's employment, by focusing on, because all that means is that you are lowering the supply of workers. So you cannot tackle inflation by trying to control demand, because in your attempts to control demand, you just diminish supply. So it might be the case that lowering unemployment in the short term is going to lead to lower inflation in the short term because people don't have as much money to spend as stuff. So there's a greater pool of stuff. There's less demand in the short term, but eventually that unemployment leads to less productivity, meaning less stuff. So it all balances out. The core problem with inflation is quantitative easing. There's simply too much money in the system. There's 2 decades worth of quantitative easing in the system that they are trying to manage, and the ship is sinking fast. This is why China is preparing themselves. Of course, Evergrande went bust last week. We're still waiting to see what sort of effect that is going to have on the Chinese markets. Okay, they had a middle class there that was starting to develop. They had a lot of people who are now in this pseudo middle class lifestyle of sorts in the big cities, and they're going to want to keep that going. Okay, so the Chinese are already starting to convert a lot of their land into farmland in anticipation of blockades, sanctions, embargoes from the United States. Now, we only have a few minutes left, so we're going to have to make this next part quick. Ukraine is going to get hundreds of F-16s. Lieutenant General Mykola Oleshchuk, head of Ukraine's Air Force, has said that the Ukrainian pilots have experience operating Western-made fighter jets, which have already touched down on Ukraine airfields. A quote from Oleshchuk: "An F-16 jet has already been to Ukraine. It has touched down on our airfields. We've had joint training with F-16 pilots, and so we do have experience operating F-16 jets. I think this is crucial," he says. Now, with respect to the issue of the Panama Canal, that issue could very well become very problematic in the not-so-distant future. A drought is restraining the ability of getting ships through the canal. 200 ships compared to 90, which is typical. So you have 200 ships that are waiting, and some of those ships are already getting beached, so to speak. I can't remember what the exact terminology is, but they're already running aground, okay? And this could contribute to inflation. Billions of dollars of trade go through the Panama Canal, 40% of U.S. trade, and it is not good. This graph right here shows you how much the U.S. is paying on its debt. This is just interest on the debt. It's up to $1 trillion, up from just $500 billion only a year ago. It's about to get very, very interesting, folks. The Iranian oil tanker Roe, USA, confiscates Iranian oil in Texas. Already, Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard has warned that those involved in offloading the Suez Rajan's cargo should expect to be struck back. Where are they going to strike back? Is it going to be in Iraq? Is it going to be in the Persian Gulf? Or will it be right here at home in North America? Many people think that Iran is going to seize more oil ships in the region, and this is breaking news. Speedboats and drones have forced a helicopter to land on the USS Bataan assault ship that has 4,000 crew members. I'm assuming that is in the Persian Gulf. So things are getting spicy in the Persian Gulf as well. Nicaragua plans to host Russian military bases, and President Daniel Ortega signed an agreement for Russian bases as well as cruise missiles to be present in the country. Finland is stockpiling nuclear supplies. They hope to become the largest hub for CBRN supplies, and they're building one of the largest supply centers in Europe. So that's going to contain all manner of hazmat equipment, Geiger counters, acute radiation sickness medication, vaccines as well, because of course they are preparing for the bird flu. And the next big, perhaps, bioweapon, we'll say, let's not go there. North Korea scrambled more jets to intercept a U.S. recon plane, and this is coming in advance of major U.S. joint naval exercises with the South Koreans next week. It's going to be a very interesting week in the economy, in terms of the climate chaos that is going on up here. The fires are going to continue to rage. We got World War III on the brink on multiple fronts. And now Syria, it's only a matter of time before either a Russian or American plane gets shot down. I think it's probably going to be a Russian one, and the F-35 will finally land its first kill ever in history. And I think that's going to be a bad omen for things to come. I gotta go, folks. Let me know what you're hearing about in your neck of the woods in the comment section below. And please do yourself a favor and go and watch that interview that we did with Lynette Zhang. There's 2 parts of it. We released them back-to-back days, about 2 hours of great informative content there. She talks about the price of gold, which is drastically undervalued at this point in time, and why they are artificially suppressing the price so that they don't spook the markets and that they don't spook people. My mind was blown with some of the stuff that she educated us on. So go and check that out. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.